If you're a betting person, this is the year to believe in Ozzie Albies. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, February 5th. This is your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And as we're doing this position player preview week, looking at what they did last year, what the projection systems expect from these players this week, and then whether we think they're going to come in above or below those projections, the vibes are different in each of these shows. The outfield show was hopeful. Ronald should be back by early May. Jurickson Profar looked good, and even if he regresses a little bit, he'll still be good. Michael Harris could be a breakout guy. The vibes on Tuesday were great. Austin Riley could contend for an MVP this year. Matt Olson could easily be a 4,100 guy. Marcell Ozuna should be a 4,100 guy. Up front, the vibes today, talking about the middle infield, are not as good as they were on Monday and Tuesday. But we're going to start off with the most hopeful of these, Ozzie Albies. Okay? We all love our short king, right? Ozzie is, if I have this right, he is now currently the longest tenured major league player on the Atlanta Braves. Him and Fried were all around that same time. AJ Minter was around that same time as well. Obviously, Fried and Minter being gone, Albies is now the longest tenured player on the major league roster, tenured with the Braves. And he's had a really, kind of like Matt Olson, he's had a really interesting pattern to his career. And it's going to go back actually pretty far. And I'd not to throw a ton of statistics. I've done a lot of that this week where I've just thrown things at you. I've thrown numbers at you. I've thrown statistics. I've thrown stats and all of that. But let's put it like this. Even year Ozzie Albies is either a league average hitter or he's hurt. Okay? 2018, he was an all-star. We'll give him this credit. He was an all-star at second base in 2018. OPS plus was 101, so right there at average, right? 2020, shortened year, OPS was 100. He only played half those games, 29 to 60. 2022, he played a grand total of 64 games with a 93 OPS plus, 7% below league average. 2024, he got in 99 games with a 95 OPS plus. He was 5% below league average. But odd number Ozzie Albies led the National League in hits in 2019, had a 113 OPS plus. 2021, in 19, Ozzie was a Silver Slugger at second base, by the way. 2021, All-Star, Silver Slugger, 13th place finisher in MVP, right? 30 homers, 20 stolen bases, 108 OPS plus, third best mark of his career. 2023, batted 280, so it's a 126 OPS plus, 16th place MVP finisher, all-star selection with 33 homers and 13 stolen bases, had 109 RBI. It's the second season of his career where he broke 30 homers and 100 RBI. And a lot of those those even year issues have been injuries. 2018 was healthy, 158 games, right? Second highest total of his career. But again, in 2020, 29 of the 60 games. 2022, 64 of the 162. And then 2024, 99 of the 162. The odd number years have featured both better performance and better health. So if you're banking on a rebound, this is a guy to bank on a rebound for. Because And again, these patterns aren't statistically significant. But at the same time, we'd feel really dumb if we didn't acknowledge these for both Matt Olson and Ozzie Albies. That for some reason, in an odd-numbered year, they perform much better than in an even-numbered year. And obviously, for Ozzie Albies, there's a clear explanation with the health. For Matt Olson, there's not really a clear explanation, but he does perform better in odd-numbered years. If it happens this year, I'm officially going to be a little freaked out, okay? But what does the projection systems think Ozzie's going to do? And this one is really interesting because, okay, again, 2023, he batted .280. 2024, he batted .251. Both of these projection systems are splitting the difference, but they're leaning more towards the lower end of the spectrum. Zips has Ozzie at .261. Steamer has him at .266. Still really good. Like, you still would absolutely take this. Both of these are a WRC plus of over 100. It's also funny to me the number of games. Steamer gave him, in essence, a full season. I went back and looked after the Matt Olson thing. They don't really credit anybody with 162. They assume 150 is the max for anybody. Steamer gave him a full season. Zips gave him 118 games. Big discrepancy there. But on base within 8 points of each other, slugging is exactly the same. And so Zips says, hey, 18 homers, 72 RBI on a .261 average. Steamer says 22 homers and 80 RBI on a .266 average. Neither one of those, as you can obviously tell, is remotely near the 100 plus RBI that Ozzie's had in the last two fully healthy seasons. The home run total, obviously well clear of 30 homers. And there's an interesting conversation to be had about the future of Ozzie Albies. This is his final guaranteed year of his deal. After 2025, there's a club option for 26, a club option for 27, and Ozzie Albies hits free agency in 2028 at age 31. I genuinely don't know if we should realistically expect an extension or not. That's going to be a topic down the road. Obviously, it's not going to be today's show, but there's arguments both ways to be made. I've got some reasons to be hopeful about Ozzie's 2025 and some reasons to be concerned, right? Last year was quietly the best strikeout season of Ozzie's career. His strikeout rate came down to 14.9%. He technically did better than that in 2017, but that was like 50-something games. So, best strikeout rate of his career. By contrast, it's been dropping almost every year. 2020, again, shortened year, small sample, 29 games. 24% strikeout rate. But since then, 18.7, 17.5, 16.2. It's been dropping every season. 2024, 14.9%. Now, 2024 was shaping up to be another underperformance year like 22 was with the home run rate, the walk rate, and all of that. But I find it really interesting that, okay, he's been getting better and better at not striking out the older he gets. It's also worth being hopeful about the fact that he started off very hot. The first month plus of the season, from when the season started in late March all the way through the end of April, he had a 903 OPS. Ozzie came out the gate hot. The injury was later in the summer. He also had an extended slump prior to the injury, right? He went from a 903 OPS in the first month plus of the season to a 621 OPS in May, right? Reason for concern there. And then we've discussed this a little bit on the show. We haven't gone into super deep detail, but Ozzie keeps grading out negatively on defense. Defensive metrics have not been kind to a lot of Atlanta Braves, but with Ozzie, even a lot of the components of defense don't grade out that well. Despite having average speed, 27.2 feet per second, 46th percentile, Ozzie grades out below average on range, and we've discussed the arm before being quite literally the worst non-first base arm in baseball. When you sort all qualifying players by lowest average arm speed. And the way that StatCast does this, it's the hardest 10% of your throws. It's a bunch of first basemen, it's Ozzie Albies, and then a bunch more first basemen. It's legitimately one of the worst non-first base throwing arms in all of baseball. And that's part of the reason why that whole extension conversation gets a little bit complicated, right? I've said this on shows before about how if Nacho Alvarez doesn't stick it short, do you play him at second and you let Ozzie DH him? Like, how do you work that out until somebody gets hurt and you have an everyday starter? But you're in a situation where Ozzie's quickly getting to the point of his arm is getting like closer and closer to being unplayable every single season. 4th percentile arm strength last year. Lot to talk about, but from an offensive perspective, like he can do well enough defensively, okay? And I think that's really what matters. Second base defense isn't as critical as shortstop, third base, things like that. He can do well enough, and if he hits like odd year Ozzie Albies is going to hit, then you're perfectly fine with Ozzie Albies in 2025. Even if he just comes in on these projections and he's just above average, that's still, for this lineup, that's still really good. Now, is that somebody you're going to want to bat 6th? Yes. You're not going to want to put him in the 2-hole, but that's still absolutely like additive to your lineup and to your roster. A guy who at times last year wasn't additive to your roster, Orlando Arcia. Let's talk about him next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the middle infield and the projections for these guys. And Orlando Arcia is the player that I think probably gets the most, not hate, but the most frustration, the most aggravation among the fan base, right? He's the guy that people most want to see replaced out of this lineup. And we've covered this before. We'll touch on it a bit in the third segment when we get there, by the way, about just how hard it is to replace a shortstop in free agency unless you're willing to pop a qualifying offer and make a large deal, right? A lot of the biggest contracts that we've seen in recent years have been Dansby Swanson, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, like very expensive, very long deals into upper 30s, or I think Trey Turner signed till 40 or 41 for shortstops. They all took a qualifying offer, so Atlanta would have lost 2 draft picks to sign Willy Adames. Alex Anthopoulos has gone on the record as saying he doesn't want to do that. Orlando Arcia is going to be around for another season, it feels. There's some competition with him for the starting job. Again, we'll get to that in the third segment. But let's look at him, okay? What he's done, what he's projected to do, and if there's any hope of fixing Orlando Arcia. So he was an all-star in 2023, which kind of boggles the mind until you sit down and you look at what he did. In the first half of 2023, he batted .294. He was running. It was a little fluky. It wasn't egregiously fluky, right? It was a fully healthy lineup. There was a bunch of all-stars. He was getting pitches to hit. He was arguably on a heater. Like, he was taking advantage of the situation, but he was getting pitches to hit. It was one of those classic situations of the guy has been around MLB long enough to know how to adjust and hit professional pitching, but he had not been a starter in a while. And so major league teams, the book was not out on how to attack Orlando Arcia yet. He makes the all-star team. Second half of 2023, the league adjusted, right? He bats .235 with a 713 OPS. I can't read my writing. 713, 715. One of the point is, it went down 50-something points from the first half. Not an egregious drop, but it did drop in the second half. Obviously, corresponding drop in batting average and all of that. And then 2024, the floor absolutely drops out on Orlando Arcia. He bats .218 with a 625 OPS. So year over year, his OPS drops 100 and I can't do math here. 116 points. His OPS, year to year, he drops 116 points in OPS. He goes from a 99 OPS plus to a 70. So he goes from just barely below average at shortstop, where it's sometimes hard and sometimes surprisingly good offense, weird, to 30% below the average starter. And we've broken this down on previous shows earlier in the offseason, but situationally, Orlando Arcia was even worse at times, right? And here's the fun thing. You name a situation, Orlando Arcia was probably not good at leading off an inning. He batted 181. Just about anywhere in the lineup, he didn't do well. He did have 3 games where he batted second, by the way, in case you forgot about this. He went 2 of 13 with 3 strikeouts. But just full counts, he batted 175. Most guys do bat in a pitcher's count, right? When 0-2 count, he batted 106. Most guys are going to do poorly in those counts. But runners in scoring position, 155 batting average, 400 OPS. He had 18 hits in 116 at-bats with runners in scoring position. He had, if I'm reading this right, he had exactly 8 sacrifice hits. 8 sacrifice hits in 137 plate appearances with runners in scoring position. Yeah, a 400 OPS. His split in OPS plus compared to the rest of the league was 11. Men on base in general, he batted 198. Runners on second and third, he batted 100. Runners on the corners, he batted 067. Bases loaded, batted 133. Situationally, in just about every single situation that matters for scoring runs, right? Men on base in general, 198. It's just, my favorite one, runners on third, less than 2 outs. Orlando Arcia batted 048. Now, he did have 7 sacrifice flies in those situations. At least sometimes he was able to get that guy in. But just in almost every single situation that matters, Orlando Arcia was worse than his already poor stats on the season. And Steamer and Zips both see it getting a little bit better, right? Zips has him batting 230, 15 homers. Steamer has him batting 237, 16 homers. Neither one of them are glowing endorsements there. Both of them have the strikeout rate of 20, 21% if you round up, which is right in line with his career averages. So I think the thing here is, can you live with a 230 or a 235 hitter if he's batting 9th and giving you at least above average defense, right? Because something that Alex Anthopoulos, I've heard him say it 2 different times this offseason, is he said, that's one thing if you're batting 9th. There were times last year we had him batting 5th, which, yeah, no, AA's right. 16 games, Orlando Arcia batted 5th. He actually did better than his normal numbers. Batting 5th, he hit 224. But as far as that back of the lineup thing goes, he batted 234 in the 7 hole. He batted 244 in the 8 hole. It was when you had to move him up in the order, and that's when they were better able to attack him. And just for some reason, I guess he wasn't hitting as well as when he was at the bottom of the order. Now, the hard part of saying that is he batted like 211 from the 9 hole. But the point is, for the most part, on average, he did better in the back half of the lineup than he did in the top half of the lineup. And again, if Orlando Arcia is batting 9th, I think you take a 235. When you look at the alternative, the real alternative this offseason was Willy Adames getting 7 years and $182 million. And the way that contract is backloaded, I think he has 2 seasons of $13 million. And then after that contract is $31 million a year. for 7 years into, he's 29 years old. He'll be doing that till he's 36. And Atlanta, who one, nobody's making over $22 million a year. And then two, would have had to give up 2 draft picks and $1 million from this, from your international bonus pool to sign him. There's an argument for Ha-Seong Kim. I honestly believe that player opt-out was very important to him, and he probably wasn't going to take your offer unless you were just stupid crazy with the money, which Atlanta doesn't do. But when it comes to, do you want to pay, $27 million AAV for Lee Adames or $2 million for Orlando Arcia and bat him ninth, it makes sense they went with Arcia. If they did want to bring in competition for him, or if they're hoping somebody beats him out in spring training, who are those candidates? We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby talking about the middle infield and what the projection systems have them doing, those players doing in 2025, right? Ozzie Albies, second baseman. As of now, Orlando Arcia is expected to be the starting shortstop, but he will have some competition in camp. And there's 3 real places that competition is going to come from. And we'll take them in opposite order of likelihood, right? The least likely guy to take over shortstop from Orlando Arcia is Rule 5 pick Christian Cairo. And it's so unlikely that I'm not even sure if it's Cairo or Cairo. I believe it's Cairo. If otherwise, for sure, drop it in the comments down below and let me know. But a 4th round pick in 2019 by the then Indians, now Guardians, Atlanta took him in the Rule 5 draft. And this is a situation where last year in AAA Columbus, the first time he ever hit AAA was last season, age 23. Really nice sample size, 69 games. He hit .233 with a .670 OPS. Exactly 2 home runs and 12 stolen bases. So that's the kind of the profile. Oh, and a .314 slug. His career slugging in the minors is .314. We know the Braves prefer guys who hit the ball hard. That is not a thing that Christian Cairo is giving you. He'd have to play exceptional defense and go on a heater to win the job over Orlando Arcia. My honest expectation is he gets returned back to Cleveland, right? You have to keep these guys on your major league roster all season. There is some carve out in there for an injured list stint, and it's just so hard for a position player to stick as a Rule 5 selection, especially for a contender, right? It sometimes can happen with a non-contender. The Tigers a few years ago kept Akil Baddoo because they weren't contending. They could run him out there every day, and it didn't matter if he was terrible. So I genuinely doubt that Cairo is going to stick on the roster. Now, Nick Allen is a different situation. Atlanta made a trade to get Nick Allen from the Athletics. I caught myself and didn't say Oakland Athletics because they're not the Oakland Athletics. I believe it was cash consider. Oh, no, it was minor leaguer Jared Johnson. That's who the deal was. And to me, he's the most likely utility option other than Luke Williams, right? He's your kind of go-to middle infield guy. 3 years in the majors, 247 games, career .209 hitter. Career slug is .283. He's also not giving you power. He has 9 career home runs in, again, 247 games. It's a pace of 6 homers a year. But, he also only has 8 stolen bases. So he's not really a speed threat. He's not really a power threat. He's a defensive guy. And to me, Nick Allen feels like that interchangeable backup middle infielder that you get him, and if he's not bad, you just DFA him and you move on. You don't care, right? The Braves signed Luis Guillorme last year. They actually gave him like $1 million, I think. And then pretty early, they realized, we're not feeling this. He's not the backup guy for us. They flipped him, sent him to the Angels. They also cycled through a bunch of dudes. Joey Wendell, they claimed him and played him like twice and let him go. Nick Allen feels like a guy that if he makes the roster, good. He has no options left. He doesn't make the roster. You have to potentially give him up. But you also don't feel bad if he has to leave, right? You don't feel bad if you have to cut him or whatever. The actual candidate for supplanting Orlando Arcia is Nacho Alvarez, right? We've talked about him a little bit in previous shows. I think he's one of the most important prospects for the Braves this year because he dictates what's going to happen in 2026 and 2027 at the shortstop position. You do have you have a club option year for Arcia for $2 million for 26. But he was a college third baseman. They moved him to shortstop. And a lot of the bat, he didn't look great in this major league sample, right? But the bat at the minor league level absolutely looked like he can be an impact player from a getting on base, batting average type of perspective once he gets comfortable with the majors, right? In Gwinnett in 64 games last year, he batted .297 with an .861 OPS, 10 homers, which was the most he had hit in any season of his major league career. Like he had 7 in 2023. The entire year was spent in high A Rome, right? And that was 116 games. He hits 10 homers in 64 games in Gwinnett. But .398 on base. He only strikes out 45 times in 64 games. He's a high contact bat. The exit velos aren't there. The power's not there. But it's a high contact, high on base bat. And that's legitimately a useful skill at the major league level. There's a reason why there are some people who like Luis Ariz. I think he's way overrated. He does one thing really well, but he does it really well. Nacho Alvarez, I think, can be a version of that, but he can also draw walks. He can also be a decent base runner. And the big question for me is the defense. Okay? If Nacho Alvarez can be average at shortstop, then you, at the very worst, have a bridge player to get you to some of these exciting young international free agent shortstops. A John Gill, a Jose Perdomo, maybe an Boris Tavares if he can figure it out. The issue you have is if Nacho Alvarez can't stick it short, then it's the Orlando Arcia show. There are some free agents. We had a question about would Jose Iglesias make sense, and I do see the value of adding him on a short-term deal. 35 years old, turned 35 beginning of January. Last year, I believe he was like top 3 on the Mets in WAR. Signed to a minor league deal. They called him up 85 games, 3.1 WAR because he hit .337. He played second, he played third, he played short. At the same time, he did have some significant overperformance of all of the expected stats. .337 average, the expected batting average .285. Still really good average, yes. Slugging of .448, the expected slugging was .369. Okay? Doesn't strike out a lot, doesn't whiff a lot, doesn't really walk a ton either. Defensively, he's still strong. The arm's not really there, but he's got good speed, he's got good range. I'm not opposed to something like that, and I think a signing like this, a Jose Iglesias, maybe a Paul DeJong, a guy that can play shortstop, but is not somebody that is an obvious slam dunk starter, a veteran, skilled depth guy. This is the exact type of signing you could see between pitchers and catchers reporting in the first game. You could see it 2 weeks into spring. Think about Adam Duvall last year, right? Rotational depth outfielder they picked up with a week and a half left in spring. Jose Iglesias, Paul DeJong, one of those two guys could be that guy this year. What's the likelihood that one of those guys supplants Orlando Arcia as the starter? Unless Arcia regresses even worse, probably not a ton. But if there's going to be an add to the middle infield, it feels like it's a situation like this, where you are comfortable if you have to throw Jose Iglesias out there for a week at short because Orlando Arcia's twisted an ankle, right? If Ozzie breaks a finger on a bunt attempt we don't bunt, on a pitch and misses 3 weeks, you can throw Jose Iglesias in there for 3 weeks, you feel okay. You can call up Nacho Alvarez and you're probably okay. He looked overmatched last year. He's had time to work on that. If you see a signing in the position player group in the infield, this is the exact type I think you'll see. Another one of these preview shows tomorrow, we're talking about the catchers, Sean Murphy, but then Chadwick Tromp, Kurt Casale, what to expect there. In the meantime, you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell when we drop the next episode. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.